Hi and welcome to the second video of my Webflow course. To get started, we first need to have a Webflow account. Thankfully, this is totally free. Once you have an account, you can see in the plans that you have up to 2 projects for free, so you can totally test the whole platform without any commitment. And in fact, when you create a project, by going to create new project, you have a bunch of templates, and a lot of these templates are actually free as well. Using a template is great for someone who's never done design before, because starting from scratch can be a little bit daunting. But in this case, I'm going to walk you through every step of the way, and the whole design that we're creating is fully custom. As you can see, we don't want to use any template, and we want to learn how to use all the key techniques to create something that is fully customized. If you work at a big company or you want to create your own product and you want to step up a little bit your design, this is the perfect course for you, because we are going to learn how to use a design that was delivered to you or something that you have created yourself and try to implement it from scratch. So before you start, make sure that you have downloaded the assets files that is found in this course. I'm going to include the link, and we have the sketch files. We also have the assets files, which includes the SVGs, the images, as well as the animations, and we're going to be able to drag and drop that to Webflow. So for this new project, we're going to create a blank site, and you can put any name that you want. This is auto-generated. I'm just going to put angle 3 and then create project. The first time you land in Webflow, it can be a little bit overwhelming, but don't worry, I'm here to guide you. Once you get used to it, it's pretty much like a design tool. So you have the layers on the left, the inspector on the right. The first thing we're gonna do is to import our assets. We're gonna go to the assets from the left menu, and then we're gonna drop the files from what we have downloaded. So I'm gonna go to the assets folder, select everything, and then drag and drop all the files right here. So we're going to start with a very simple content block right here, and we're going to do that in Webflow. Let's go to the navigator. Now we're going to insert an element. Make sure to have body selected and then click on the plus sign right here. It says add elements, and the keyboard shortcut is A. So I'm going to click on it, and here I have a bunch of elements that I can insert, including components, layout, media, forms, CMS, typography, and basic stuff like buttons. In this case, we're going to look at layout, because layout is for big blocks of content, such as section, container, grid, columns. In this case, we want to have a massive section for the hero content. So I'm going to click on section, and there you go, I have my first container. Now, if I go back to Sketch, what I can recommend you is to try to follow as much as possible the way you organize your design in Sketch. So for example, here I organize in different sections of my design. So hero is the whole thing here with this background, and then I have compositions with another huge background and a bunch of layouts inside. So I'm going to organize Webflow exactly the same way so I can be consistent with my design. So section is great for a huge piece of content that takes the full width. And we're gonna use that for the background. So we're gonna go to the inspector and scroll down at the very bottom, and we're gonna find image and gradient. And this is where we can add an image, choose the image, and just select one of the images that we have in our assets. If you scroll down a little bit, you're gonna find background 1. Just select it. By default, we have a width of 125. What I can suggest is to put auto. So we can take the original size of the image, which is 3008 by 774. Then we're gonna set it to top middle in terms of positioning, and we're not going to make it repeat itself if the height of the box is ever bigger than the height of the image. So you don't want that to tile. And don't worry if you don't understand everything, because we're going to come back to these techniques, to these properties more than once. So I'm just gonna click outside and notice that once you start customizing the properties, it's going to create a custom class. What is a class? It's basically a CSS class that can be reused multiple times for your styles. And we can even change the name of the class, such as hero, and then it's going to apply as the name of the layer. And another cool thing is that the hint of the change is in blue. So everything else is grayed out or just normal. And then what has changed specifically for what we just did is in blue. And we also have the orange color, which is inherited by something like a parent, for example. In this case, it's the body. So the body has these values and it's passed down to all the inner elements. So if I were to go to body and change the font to open sans, then every single element inside body is going to inherit that font. And speaking of fonts, let's just add custom fonts. So you have the list, which is from Webflow. You can also use fonts from Google. So when I click add fonts, it's gonna go to this page and I can select one of the Google fonts that I would like to add that is not available in the list, or I can upload a custom font. So I actually included the fonts to make it easy for you just to have 4 files from SF Pro, and these are the fonts that I want to add, and I can just upload by selecting all the font files and dropping right here on top of the button. And once you do that, it's going to upload all of those, and make sure that you click on upload for all of them. And once you have the fonts, they should be seen like this, and you can edit or delete. And once you come back to your project, and here you're gonna have to refresh the page by doing Command R or Control R for Windows. And I'm gonna select body and set my default font to SF Pro Rounded. And like this, every single element moving forward is going to have my custom font. Okay, so going back to the UI, what you notice is that when you design for desktop, you need to have some sort of a container that centers the content. You sort of like have a guide for the content. Some of the content, such as the background, doesn't need that guide, which is why we use the section. But most of the content, such as the front content, like the text, and this content, like the images and the gallery, you want it to respect a certain guide so that it centers and that it's adaptive as well. Because you want to have negative spacing on the left and on the right. You don't want your content to always hug the sides. Otherwise, it's really, really hard to read. And we don't respect some of the general design rules, such as the text should not be too long to read or too spread out. We want to have some sort of a container. So Webflow has this really useful element called the container. And the container is always going to be adaptive. So you can see the container is going to adapt based on your device. Now we're ready to input the content. But inside our content, we have multiple blocks. So you can see that the background is one container, and then we have the content, which is kind of like a ruler for all content. And then inside that, we need content blocks. So for example, this is a content block, the phone is a content block, this image, this is another one. So we want to use them sort of as Lego blocks that's going to use different layout techniques such as flex and grid to pile together in a way that it's going to make a lot of sense. So we're going to go back to Webflow, and we're going to create the common element called the div block. A div block is a small piece of element that can be used for anything you want. It can be a rectangle, a container, a collection of content, even a button that perhaps is a little bit more advanced than the basic button. So let's add that. And now inside container, we have div block, and this should cover most layouts that you're gonna find online. We have the body, which has the general styles and fonts, hero, which is a section, and you can have multiple sections with a full width background. And then we have container, which contains the content so that it's adaptive. and then we can have multiple content blocks as divs inside the container. We can finally add some text content. So I'm going to press A and then select heading. So heading is the title of your page, and we use the H1 to make sure that this is the main title, and also it's good for Google because it's going to learn about the main content of your page. So I'm going to paste some text, and this is my main title, and I'm going to make this black. We can either use the hex color code or we can just type black. I'm going to set the font size to 32 and then the font weight to normal. There's one part of this text that needs to be a lot bigger, and that is the 1000. So we can select this specific text, click the brush, and then we can customize the style only for this text. So make sure to select this, the text span, and we can set to 140. We can make it into a block instead. So instead of inline, which is good for text, we're gonna set it in its own line, and so we can use the block element. And make sure that the text height is the same as the font size, so 140 as well. So now we can set this one to white, and we have something very similar to the design. Okay, so now we can do the button. Make sure to always select the parent before inserting an element because it's going to insert inside that parent. So I'm gonna press A and I'm going to select a div again because the button that we're gonna create is more custom. So this is the button, and you can see that it has multiple elements inside it. Usually a normal button is very simple. It's just some text, maybe some icons. But in this case, we're gonna use a div block. By the way, at the beginning, you're gonna be confused as to what to use in terms of element. What I can say is that use a div block. If you're not sure if it's a container or a section or columns, just use the div block because it's an all-purpose element. Now we're gonna set the width to 280 and then the height to 70. So this should be our button. Let's scroll down and then set the background color to white with a border radius of 20. The background is also going to have an image. So I'm gonna click on the plus sign and then choose the image. We're going to select at the very bottom for the background button right here, .svg. Usually we want to set a width of auto and we don't want a tile. So the position is going to be from the top left, and this should be fine. Now selecting this div block, I'm going to press A to insert two text elements. So text and then another text. The first one, I'm going to name it purchase for 79. And the second one is launch promo. So on the left side, we're gonna have an icon. So the best thing is to set the padding for the div block so that we can push the content a little bit. So I'm gonna set a padding right here where it says spacing, and the padding is going to be 70 from the left. So I can type 70, press enter. So it's going to push the content a little bit. And I'm going to try to center from the top, and I'm gonna use a top padding of 16. So when you mouse over these paddings, you can see the green space, which is what determines the padding. You can also use margin. It's very easy to use because it's a visual tool and everything just happens in real time. I could have used the flexbox to align vertically, which is the proper way to do it, but I'm going to teach you that in the next session. So the first text is going to be a font size 20 with a font weight of bold. I can decide to change the colors for each one, which is defaulted to dark gray, and the color code is 333, or I can just select the parent and set it to black for both. So voila, we have a button. And the last thing we want to add is a drop shadow. And I'm going to show you how to add a drop shadow. We're going to go to box shadows, click on the plus sign, and here we have some default drop shadow. and the angle is kind of awkward. So we're gonna set it to 180, which is what I always suggest for drop shadows. And the distance is going to be 10 with a blur of 20. This is pretty much the numbers I use all the time, with the blur roughly double the distance. And usually with modern design, you want to have a shadow that is more spread out, so it is softer to see, and you don't want something that is harsh like the default color, which is black. And so I'm gonna set it to black, but at 15% opacity. So now it looks much nicer. Next, I'm going to add a text block. So I'm gonna select the parent div block, press A, and select the text block. Here, I'm going to paste some text, and I'm gonna set the font size to 16. The font size is going to be a custom code from the design. And yes, it's barely readable here, but it's not supposed to be there. We're going to push the content a little bit later. And we also have a small button. So selecting the div block again, we're going to create a button. The button is going to say download sample. And it's already styled to blue by default, so we're gonna have to customize it, starting with the background color. So I'm gonna scroll down a little bit and change from that blue to what I have in my design. And for the color, I'm also going to customize it as well using this color code. Let's also set the border radius to 10, and we want to add an icon in the left side. And what you're gonna notice is the button, it's not a container. It's not like a div where you can have multiple elements inside it. And it would have been useful to add the icon before the text. So what we're gonna do is a trick that I use all the time in CSS, which is to use the background for the icon. I'm going to click on the plus sign for the background and choose the image. Pick one of the icons, such as this one, icon-download, and set the width to auto. Again, auto is the original size of the asset. And then I'm going to set the position from the middle left and don't tile. Additionally, I want to set a little bit of padding from the left side of 10 pixel instead of percentage. And you have to pay attention to this because we have multiple units. Normally it's pixel, but sometimes it's going to use percentage. And in this case, we're going to use pixels. Now, because we have the icon right here and it's overlapping with the text, we're going to have to add a padding left of 40, like this. All right, so we have the main pieces of our content. And if we compare it to our design, we want to have a block that is restricted in terms of width so that the text does not get too long. And we want to have some extra spacing. We also want to have spacing from the top. First of all, I'm going to select the hero section and I'm going to add some padding. So the padding is going to be 200 from the top and then 100 from the bottom. Next, I want to make sure that this content block has a 320 in terms of width. So now the text is much more inviting to read. Then we also want to add some spacing. So we want to have the spacing between the title and the button to roughly 30. So I'm going to set the margin to 30 for the H1. And then this text right here, which is a text block, is going to be 30 from the top and then 30 from the bottom as a margin. One thing I want to mention is that when you use the H1, it has some default margins. And if you're not aware of that, it can really mess up with your spacing. So I'm going to set this one to 0 and it should look a lot more like the design. Another super important thing to remember is that when you start using an element, it comes with some default class and it's not going to have a custom class. But as soon as you make a customization, it's going to create a class for you with a preset name. So what you want to do is to name your elements properly. In this case, I'm going to name it content block. And when I do that, it's going to be in my style manager. And the style manager is kind of like your design system, your styles. And it's really useful when you're reusing the same elements, the same styles over and over. In this case, the content block is something I'm going to be using multiple times. If you look at the design, I use this sort of layout here multiple times. I have the title, description, logos, button, and I do that multiple times. It's really efficient when you're designing a website. So it's important to name your classes properly, which gives the name automatically to your layer. So I'm gonna do the same with the div block. Instead of saying div block, I can be more specific and name this purchase. And for the text block, I can just name it text. And then one last detail, we can have multiple backgrounds for any block. So in this case, it's a section. I'm gonna go to backgrounds and I'm gonna add a second background. So we're gonna use, just like in the design, we're gonna use this one, background 2, using a width of auto. And we're gonna do that from the top right. And we don't want this to tile. So I'm gonna press the X sign and we're good. Before we conclude this session, we're gonna go to the project settings because I wanna show you some really cool stuff. So we're gonna go to project settings, and here we can customize a bunch of things, such as the name of the project, then the fave icon for the browser, as well as the web click for mobile if people want to add that to their home screen on their phone. So we're going to upload an image for those, starting with the fave icon and then the web clip. Now, there are many settings that you can explore, but in this case, I want to focus on the editor because you can add more people to the project, so you can essentially collaborate with your colleagues, your clients, and have them edit different parts of the website, such as the CMS, the copywriting, the custom code, and of course, the design itself. And if you want to have that, you're going to have to upgrade though. And if we look at plans, it's pretty affordable considering that it's doing all the hosting for you. It's going to have all the backups for every version of the changes, and it also gives you different options such as custom domain, more bandwidth, better loading internationally, which is what CDN stands for, more content management items, as well as the ability to upload for your forms. Those are more technical stuff. As you explore Webflow and as you work with it, you may need those things in the future. But otherwise, to follow this course is totally free with the enhanced staging plan. It's just that if you want to have collaborators, if you want to have like more options, then you can pay for it. And I think the price is really affordable compared to most hosting solutions, which can cost in the hundreds, at least in my experience. So let's scroll back up and take a look at some integration. If you have Google Analytics, which is completely free, you can just paste the code right here and you're going to be able to track who's visiting your site and what page they're visiting. And finally, we have the custom code, which is really useful if you have some third-party integrations or some custom code that needs to be pasted in the head tag or the body tag. And this is for people who have a little bit more experience with coding and integrating third-party apps. All right, we're gonna go back to dashboard and then we're gonna deploy our website because we have something that's pretty good looking. So we can go to publish and then publish to selected domain. Right now it's going to publish at thisname.webflow.io, and I can click on this icon next to it and it's going to open how it's going to look like in production. And you can see that it does an okay job at adaptiveness. It's not perfect, which is something that we're going to learn next, which I noticed that we don't have a background color. So let's go back and just select the body and put, instead of white, we're going to use the same color as this. And I have the color code right here. And now we can publish it again. and it should be able to see the change when you refresh this right here. So now it's fixed the background right here. One last quick topic is the pages. So if you click right here on this pages icon, you can see that you can have multiple pages. Usually a website is not comprised of a single page. And of course, we're gonna learn a lot more later on, but I just wanna point out that if you click on the settings icon, you can set the SEO. SEO stands for search engine optimization, which means that this is what Google is going to pick up. And I'm going to put angle 3. The description is going to be pasted from here. Same for the title tag. And then if you scroll down a little bit, we have the open graph. So what this is for social sharing. This is going to allow you to have a really nice image as well as a title and a description when people share it on Twitter or Facebook. So you can use the same as SEO title, same as meta description, but you should 100% also have the preview image, which makes your link so much better to look at. And you can go to Dropbox and just put that in the public folder and get the Dropbox link. So right here, copy Dropbox link, paste that right here. It's not gonna work unless you put, instead of the default link, you're gonna have to put dl.dropboxusercontent.com. And if you do that, it's going to show the image. Now you don't have to use Dropbox, but it's a really good solution. Most people have Dropbox. You can use Cloud App, you can use your own hosting solution, but you just need to put this URL of the image that you have put online somewhere. So now we can save and go back to our navigator, publish again, and then we're going to be ready to show to our clients or even to deploy our website. It's going to be online. It's going to be beautiful. So that's the power of Webflow. That's why it's so easy for most people who needs a website really quick, who don't have a lot of coding experience. And even for people who have a lot of coding experience, this is a really good solution for collaboration and testing out concepts and ideas and just push it super quick. Of course, we're not done yet. I want to show you so many more techniques. We're just scratching the surface at this point. In the next session, I want to show you all about flex and grid layouts and then media queries so that we can make this layout a lot more adaptive to mobile and everything else in between. I think you're going to have a lot of fun. I hope you'll stick around. See you in the next session.